We are now in topic 5 and we will be discussing about animals, specifically methods of grazing livestock. We will identify different methods of grazing. Livestock are animals kept at home for agriculture purposes. Animals kept at home. They are cattle, we know sheep, we know goats, pigs, and other animals that may be kept at home. They are all called livestock animals. They are different methods of grazing livestock. One method of grazing livestock is rotational method. This method, animals are allowed to move within a restricted area. That an animal is moved from this place. After it finishes the grass there, it goes to another place. There are different subdividings of rotational method of grazing. We have tethering. In tethering, an animal is tied on a peg using a rope and allowed to graze within an area. The key word here is tied on a peg. We have an animal here. It is tied on a peg using a rope. So this is tethering. Tethering method. It's one of the rotational methods of grazing livestock. It involves animals tied on a peg using a rope and allowed to graze within an area. Another subdividing of rotational method is paddocking. In paddocking, animals are kept in paddocks. A paddock is a small field which has been fenced with a permanent fences. The animal grazes in this paddock for some time and then moved to another paddock. We have a field which is subdivided into 4 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Animals will feed on part 1. Once they are through with the grass there, they'll be moved to part 2, then part 3, then part 4. The field is subdivided with permanent fences. So this is paddocking, and the key word here is that the fences are permanent. That is paddocking. Then still under rotational grazing, we have strip grazing. In strip grazing, animals graze in a portion called a strip, from the word strip grazing. Strips are made of temporary fences which, when they graze in one strip, they are then moved to the next strip. This is strip grazing. Strip grazing. We have a field which is subdivided with temporary fences. We can see that here there are strings, just to tell the animals that you are not supposed to pass through this strip. So the key word here is the field is subdivided on a temporary fences. Once the animals are through with one field, they are then moved to the next strip to graze on it. Then once they are through, they are moved to another strip to graze. This is rotational grazing. It involves tethering, paddocking, and strip grazing. Then we have another type of grazing. The other type of grazing is herding. In this method of grazing, animals move freely with somebody looking after them. The animals do not graze within a restricted area, and instead, after the animals have grazed, they are returned home. So, what we have known about the herding is animals move freely with somebody looking after them. This is herding. There is somebody here looking after the sheep. Animals move freely all over the field. Then after they are through with grazing, they are returned home. meaning herding can only be done away from home. Then we have zero grazing. Zero grazing is another type of livestock grazing. This method of grazing is also called stall feeding. In this method, animals graze in structures called stalls. Pasture is cut and brought to them where the animal feeds on this pasture. Then the animals are not allowed to move out of the stall. We can see in this picture, we have a good demonstration of zero grazing. Animals are kept on stalls. Then feed or the pasture is cut. We can see they are eating grasses. So these grasses cut, then brought to the stall. The animal feed on them. The animals are not allowed to move out of this stall. We can see it's a building. Then we have animals feeding on grass. This method is very common on densely populated areas. Densely populated area is a place that has very many people or has a large population, meaning there is no enough space for grazing. So they decide to do zero grazing. And a good example in Kenya is Nyeri County. The place has people doing zero grazing. In that lesson, we have discussed about the methods of livestock grazing. We have known there are three main methods of livestock grazing. We have rotational grazing, which is subdivided into other three, that is tethering, paddocking, and strip grazing. Then we have zero grazing and herding.